Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining CatchOn's webinar discussing design in the unprecedented times we're living in today. I'm Kathy Feliciano-Chon, and I have the great pleasure of moderating today's panel. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce our esteemed panelists. All of them I call good friends. Suzy Annetta needs no introduction, is the founder and editor-in-chief of the Design Quarterly Design Anthology. Prior to founding the magazine, Suzy was a practicing and professionally trained interior designer. She's originally from Melbourne, but has lived in Japan and is now based in Hong Kong. Charmaine Chan has enjoyed a journalism career in Australia, Japan, and Hong Kong. She is a design editor at the South China Morning Post and the author of Courtyard Living, Contemporary Houses of the Asia Pacific, published by Thames and Hudson. Acuna is the founder and creative director of his eponymous studio with offices in Hong Kong and Manila and residential and commercial projects throughout Asia. But he's most known for his musings about design, art, travel, and lifestyle and his popular website, wonderlister.com. Rowena Gonzales is the founder of Liquid Interiors, a Hong Kong-based studio known for championing sustainability in its residential interior design work by applying international green and wellness building standards. Ross Urwin and Darrel are the founders of Infrastructure, a multidisciplinary creative agency in brand management and retail strategy. Darrel has worked with some of the world's most renowned designers and creatives developing unique and engaging design and brand experiences. Ross, on the other hand, is regarded as a design maverick for his visionary work with the likes of Lane Crawford and Liberty of London. Ross and Darrel have been creative directors of Design Shanghai and Design China Beijing since its inaugural event 7 years ago. So let's welcome our panelists. Many of us right now, hello everyone, can we just wave to the audience?
Hi.
Great. Many of us right now are working from home or are forced to be quarantined at home. So home has truly become our last refuge and in some cases prison. This pandemic has completely challenged our notions of personal space, wellness, sustainability, and productivity. So I wanted to start our talk by getting down and dirty and talking about what measures have you personally implemented in your homes recently to be able to juggle this notion of working from home, or in some cases, homeschooling demands. Let's start with you, Rowena, since I know you have children.
Yeah, so I have a 4.5-year-old and a 9-month-old. So for all of you who don't have children, you're probably the luckiest people in the world right now because it's not easy. One of the things that you really appreciate is acoustics at home. And when you are trying to do a video call, yeah, I'm definitely re-looking at acoustic barriers between where the children stay and then also and the workplace. You can have a door, but you know, what used to work before doesn't work anymore when you really, really have to do concentrated work. Yeah, so I really had to, I used to do work on the dining table, but you know, when you have to do focus work, it really has to be a separated room. So acoustics was probably one of the most important thing. And then also really looking at multifunction space. If you're like most people in Hong Kong that don't have the luxury of a separated office space, that multifunctional space needs to be used in every single square. So,
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you, Suzy. I know that you're quarantined at home right now.
I am. There's my band to prove it.
How are you coping, and what are some of the things or tips that you can give some of our listeners?
Look, to be honest, this is not really a new thing for me. Since we founded the magazine 6 years ago, I've actually spent quite a bit of time working remotely from different places as I'm traveling around and meeting people and going to exhibitions, and it all sounds very glamorous, but you know, I've been working on the road and remotely for quite a while, even in the lead up to this. And I think those of us in Hong Kong, we're all in Hong Kong, you know, with the protests late last year, we had a bit of a dry run of perhaps working remotely before the virus hit us. So for me, you know, our office, everything that we do work-wise is on a centralized drive. It's little things like that, having access to each other's calendars, GChat, different software platforms, that's really allowed us to transition very smoothly from working together day to day in the office to working remotely. I don't have children, so I'm quite grateful for that at the moment, I have to say. But for me, it's the little things, like having a really nice pen and a really nice kind of notebook, or the things that we're touching on a day-to-day basis that we use for work. For me, I'm kind of reassessing just to have something nice to hold on to, nice quality materials, and yeah, that's
Great.
That's basically my strategy at the moment.
JJ, I can see that you're actually calling in from home, so.
Yeah, so this is my home studio, and I'm with Suzy here. Before we actually had a studio, I was a one-man band. Like, you know, you're a one-man band before you become a studio. So I feel like it's kind of weird to see the rest of the world catching up with Suzy, you know, our workflow. When we started an actual office, we actually have an office in Causeway in central Hong Kong. When we started our company, we didn't want to have an office right away. We wanted to like slowly get into that kind of more traditional working space. But now this coronavirus has pushed us back to the kind of working environment when we first had a physical office, which is to all our designers to work remotely. Like Suzy, all of our data is on the cloud. And so we don't really have a physical server. And so it's great. My studio, my desk is over there. It's next to daylight. It has plants surrounding it. It's got access to fresh air. So I feel that this was already my concern right at the get-go. I wanted to carve out a home workplace. And I feel that, like Rowena is saying, people are starting to really seriously consider carving out a place to do real work and real tasks at home because of this. It's very interesting to see.
Very good point. And Ross and Darrel, can you weigh in? Oh, mute. We can't hear you. Yes, got you now. Still can't hear you. No.
Looks like you're on mute, guys.
Yeah, mute. I think you need to unmute. We're having a bit of technical difficulties. Ross, while you figure that out, let me go to Charmaine. Hi, Charmaine.
Hi. Well, I've been more or less working from home for the past 15 years, so there hasn't been a great disruption, except that, of course, now my husband is also working from home. So I've had to get used to that, and, you know, earplugs really help. But, you know, before I decided to start working from home, I did reconfigure my home. I was renovating my home, and I decided at the time to give myself a fairly small bedroom and a fairly large workspace. And, you know, that workspace is also my dressing room. It's where I exercise if I have to be inside, and it's my guest room. And I'm really glad that I placed my desk and my cupboards on opposite walls. So if I had to do Skype interviews, I didn't have to clear my room every time. And, you know, I gave myself a little perch so I could stand and work and read. And I also gave myself a very, very good work chair. But one thing I didn't do, and I'm really glad I didn't do it, is that I'm glad I didn't give myself a completely open plan home, because I'm glad I have a room to retreat to, and I'm glad I have a door to close.
It's a very good point, and I want to go back to that later when we talk about the future of home design. But before I leave that, Ross, Darrel, are you guys back online? Can we hear you? No? Ross? No, we've lost them.
Oh.
Right. We'll try and get.
I think whoever the administrator is, they can unmute and mute.
We're trying to do that right now. Okay, we have a production team trying to fix that with them. So we'll get back on that. They'll come back online. But I want to touch upon this whole topic of the future of home design, because you talk about, this has really shown the light on a very popular trend, which is an open plan, and how it's really not working in a time as what we have today. How do you think this pandemic and how we're going through it is going to be changing the future of home design? And if we have Ross and Darrel back on, can you hear us? Oh, we can't hear you. We still can't hear you.
No.
Sorry, guys. Okay, they'll try and get you back on. But let me go back to JJ. You've done a number of residential projects, starting with your family home in Manila. So just tell me your notion. How will this change how we look at home design in the future?
Absolutely. I think before this whole thing, people were thinking about working from home as a really cute thing, a cute idea that millennials are totally into and Gen Z are totally into. They weren't really taking it seriously. They were just trying to be like on trend or trendy or whatnot. But what I think is going to really happen is and this is going to connect to other topics in our talk. But I personally think that companies are going to loosen up and going to allow flexibility where people can work wherever they want. And so that's one thing. And the second thing, I think the market is going to start to demand spaces where they can actually operate a business in the house. And in that case, us designers, we may be asked by our clients, whether it's a developer or a private residential client, to really carve out a space, a live work environment that's not just a trendy selling point. It's actually very, important, pivotal now that we'll see more of these pandemics. They say more of these pandemics coming around. Something to think about.
I want to put this though in the context of the realities of living in urban cities in Asia, where the size of an average home is about 480 square feet, which is probably the size of a regular bedroom, say, in the United States. So, within that space, you're looking at people sharing anywhere from 4 to 6 people sharing that space. And the reality, how do you make it work? So I'd love for anyone to weigh in on this one. If you can raise your hands. Yes, Rowena?
Yeah, so one of the things that, I live in a very small place as well. We have, well, it's not as small, it's around 900 square feet, but, with 2 kids and a helper and parents, it, really every inch counts. One of the things that I really had to rethink is that bay window and making the bay window desk. And also to transform this multi-purpose space of, workspace, play area, video conference, and kids work desk area, all to work at different times. And the transformable part of it is so important because, especially after doing a lot more video calls, you realize that the background is so important. So it's a visual, you need that visual space as well, right? So so I've come up with a solution where, the bay window desk it's able to transform in a way that I can turn the other way so that I can have a clear background. So that was one thing that I definitely will incorporate in future multi-purpose spaces where there's supposed to be an office space. And then kids lighting is actually, you realize that kids, even if you do designate one place for them to do their studying or whatever, they move around so much. And the importance of light that is not plugged in is so important. So what is amazing is that now I found this great light that is a USB charged light with different color temperatures. Mm-hmm. So I can use it for concentration, I can use it for reading before going to bed, and it can follow my kids around wherever they go. Right. Because, as much as you want them to sit in one place to do their schoolwork. They're not, you know.
Right. Ross, sorry, are you guys on?
We're hoping you can hear us now.
Yes, we could. Right. Ross,
Sorry.
I'll yield the floor to you. We're talking about the future of home design. How will it change because of this pandemic? If you can weigh in on that one, both of you.
So I think one of the things that I think probably everyone on the panel has noticed is how we've changed because of not only the limitations of working from home and kids not being at school, but also limited travel and limited outside interaction. So I think one of the key things that Ross and I have been talking about is how we are focusing on our sensory needs. So we're not able to meet in groups of friends and have a drink, that sort of thing. So it's what are the nurturing elements that we need to bring into the home as well as those practical elements. And then another thing I think we've been talking about as well is use of space. Like before we were kind of in semi-lockdown, we had so much stuff in this space because we just love to collect things and we're completely addicted to an aesthetic. The thing that's really impacted on us in this last kind of 6 weeks, we realized we use 25% of that stuff. 75% of that stuff, we just love it because it's pretty and it looks great in the space. It's really kind of impractical. So we put a lot of stuff into storage and been doing a big edit. So I think the two things for us is really understanding what you need to exist comfortably, what fulfills your sensory needs,
right,
and the need to be nurtured. And then what's excess? So, you've really got to think about the things you bring into the home and the fact that they need to perform both form and function. But we were like super top heavy on form and not particularly top heavy on function. So,
and we had no idea, or I had no idea that I could actually do a yoga class online in a sort of 900 square foot apartment, which I've been doing for the past sort of 2 weeks because all the gyms are closed. And things like that. Like Darrel said, there's some great companies here like Boxyful, where we've had lots of our clothing packed up and sent off for storage. And it's just giving us a lot more clean space to actually live and work from.
Yeah.
I want to yield.
Kathy, can I just add something to what Darrel said? I don't have a crystal ball, so I'm not sure that this is necessarily a prediction, but maybe something that I would like to see. And I think what you said, Darrel, about the sort of sensual aspect of our homes is really important. And I think, I would like to see perhaps people, particularly in Hong Kong, with really small spaces where maybe we can't splurge on, a nice big sofa or, a new bed or things like that, which really take up a lot of space, but maybe more those little things that we're actually touching on a regular basis. So in a small apartment in Hong Kong, it might be things like cabinetry hardware or the taps in your bathroom. And those are relatively affordable to change and switch out and invest in really good ones. But they're things that we touch every single day. And they, at the risk of sounding a bit Marie Kondo here, can bring quite a bit of joy. It's something that you can appreciate daily, and it's a relatively affordable, as I said, and not a huge space taking element of a home.
Yeah,
so
I'd like to add
that.
Sorry, I just wanted to add.
Sorry, can I just give it to Charmaine? Yes, you mentioned something, because I know that you touched on this a little bit in your book, The Courtyard Living. Can you weigh in on that a little bit?
Well, before I talk about courtyards, and that they are my obsession, I go into a lot of people's homes because that's what I do for a living. I write about homes in Hong Kong, and I go into some very, very small homes as well. And what I would like to see is just more flexibility, developers giving us that flexibility. This could be pie in the sky, but I would like to see more homes that are shape-shifting homes, or furniture that is shape-shifting. So not just multifunctional, but, when you're done sleeping, why can't you put away your whole bedroom instead of just putting away your bed like a Murphy bed? So things like that, on a larger scale, I've been talking to designers and architects, and they've said that, we're sort of into hygiene part 2 now, because SARS, which was 17 years ago, opened our eyes to the types of materials that we could have, in our homes that were antibacterial and all that sort of stuff. Now we're looking at hands-free everything, you know, hands-free even door handles and bins and taps and, you know, toilets. So, you know, Toto washlets are really, really popular in Hong Kong, but there are a couple of other companies that do those all singing, all dancing toilets, but not that many. And, you know, we were talking about this before, privacy is so important now, privacy and comfort. And, you know, I also think that we need to place more importance on fundamentals like good ventilation, good lighting, a bit of outdoor space, and that's where courtyards come into it. And perhaps I'll talk about it later, but you know, this is a different subject. You know, furniture also needs to, as I said, be more functional. And a very interesting idea that a friend came up with, he's a designer, and we were talking about two-way cupboards, because I want one in my home, because I get deliveries and I'm not always at home, so the deliveries get left outside. He said that he has clients asking him for these two-way cupboards at the entrance, but with UV sterilizing lamps inside. So, you know, so goods come in and they're decontaminated, you know. And while we're talking about that, let's talk about technology. We need high-speed broadband throughout Hong Kong. You'd be surprised at how many homes don't have high-speed internet.
Very true. It's surprisingly, it's high-speed internet is really linked to your wellness.
Yeah.
To your point, Rowena, I know you want to add something to this.
Yeah, I think also one of the first things that I did and is really like rethink my mindfulness space. So it's kind of, you know, like I would say within the last 2 years, it's amazing how many clients tell me that they need a meditation space in their home. And we've done tons of meditation spaces with like a little low cabinet where you can put your yoga mat and but you know, I think at the end of the day, it's so personal and you don't really need a full space for your meditation space, but you need something that means something to you. So for example, for myself, I have a little succulents garden, and it's, you know, when I wake up, I like looking at the succulents garden and then looking at the view outside. And it's because I do it at the same time every morning. That is my space. And it's so important, like when, you know, if you're, I think like with COVID and basically all the stresses, you know, it's important to have that little space that you call your own, and make sure that it stays clear, because, you know, your mental wellness is probably the first thing to go in all of this pandemic, you know? Right. So to rebalance yourself and have a place for that.
Great. So we're compiling all of these, by the way. So at the end of our talk, we will have this video along with everybody's tips available on our website. So just a reminder for everyone. I want to shift our discussion a bit broader and put it in the context of the cities that we live in. I mean, it's predicted that nearly 70% of the world's population will be living in urban centers or cities by 2050. So that's about 30 years from now. And here in Asia, it is much more pronounced. We're urbanizing faster than any region in the world. So it's predicted about 21 of the 30 largest cities will be located in our region. So, you know, the urban arena has always been viewed through rosy lens as the cradle of collective creativity. And with this pandemic is now forcing us to rethink this notion of urbanization and density. So I just would love to just get your thoughts on this in general and where we're going with this. I mean, Suzy, if I can start with you.
Yeah, I think that's, it's a really interesting point, and it was something that was raised to me just a couple of days ago, actually, also in relation to the virus. I think, you know, generally the conversation around density and sort of academic discussion of that generally obviously leads towards density and the benefits that it has in cities. But yeah, it's kind of interesting now to be looking at that subject from a different perspective and whether it is all great. I was in Australia for a couple of weeks before flying back to Hong Kong, and that's why I'm now in quarantine. But it was certainly something that went through my mind as I was coming back, just generally how much more crowded and kind of surrounded by people we feel when we're in cities in Asia as opposed to in the West. And I know the few people that I'm friends with that have country houses could not wait to get out of the city and move back out to the suburbs or wherever it was that they were, going to be staying. So I don't know what the answer is, but I think it will perhaps shift our thinking on density for sure. This is going to have long-term ramifications.
JJ, can I get your points of view on this one? Because I know as an architect, this is something you grapple with all the time.
Yeah, I think this kind of goes back to the home design question earlier. I think overall, I think we've decided that people are going to ask for more ventilation. People are going to ask for more daylight, access to greenery, indoor, outdoor space in their home. And I think on a macro, that's the micro scale, but on the macro scale, how can that blow up even further? How can a building that has hundreds of residents be able to design for each resident to have access to all of that, but give the whole building a whole space where people can break out away from the city? This whole thing about the downtowns, invigorating downtowns, moving away from suburbia, coming into the city, it's kind of biting us back. It's so great to be part of the center of everything, but when a virus hits, all you want is greenery, all you want is sunlight, fresh air, space, skies, courtyards, back to what Charmaine is interested in. And in terms of, then you'll see city by city the difference of what that government or that government body cares about. Because when you go to, we don't have a Singapore designer on this panel at the moment, but when you go to Singapore, that government cares about space and sunlight and greenery and fresh air. Other cities don't have that great of an access to. In Hong Kong, at the very least, we have all these country trails, parks, nature. So I think what's going to happen now is maybe there's a connection between private development, designer, and government, in which everyone may have direct access to fresh air, sunlight, greenery, and space, just so it feels like they could get filtered, their lungs can get filtered. They don't have to be so dense next to someone else. Hopefully that's where we're going if no one has access to suburbia anymore. We'll see.
I mean, we're seeing a lot of this counter argument happening right now. I mean, this whole, built spaces and nature tension, I think it's definitely moving the needle more and more towards biophilic design. And to your point about Singapore, you get that from the moment you arrive. I mean, that airport is amazing.
It's obvious when the built environment of the city and the buildings really reflect what that government really cares about. For the most part, it is a physical manifestation of an idea of a theory of how they want things to be. So hopefully Hong Kong is, from coronavirus onward, Hong Kong is more than just numbers.
Charmaine,
hopefully we have access to fresh air.
Charmaine, can I get you to weigh in on that one a little bit more, your thoughts on density?
Yeah, well, the city is not dead. Urbanization will continue in Asia, but I think the coronavirus might change how cities function and I hope make them more resilient places. The cities are not discrete entities. They're these amorphous blobs that have lots of connections everywhere. And unfortunately in history, cities and infectious diseases have always gone together. So, cholera outbreaks have led to better sanitation, and respiratory diseases have led to a greater emphasis on good ventilation and light. And, I think it's probably too soon to be saying what impact this coronavirus is going to have on cities. And, we've all been led to believe that, in Hong Kong at least, density is our destiny because land is so expensive. But things are going vertical, even farms are going vertical these days. But at the same time, when we get through this and when people realize that they don't have to go back to an office environment and businesses realize that they don't need all these people sitting in an office, I think maybe we'll get over time an emptying a little bit of cities. But, I think we should be looking at digital infrastructure, and maybe that will be our salvation. We've already seen how tracking has really helped places like Singapore and South Korea. And, privacy concerns notwithstanding, there is technology out there that can tell us who in our neighborhood is sick. Dense cities are the most efficient ways to live. And, it's also the most the least environmentally destructive way to live. It allows mass transit and all these wonderful things. And someone said to me, it also counterintuitively fosters these social and support networks. It's only since that we've been told to observe social distancing that some of us have become closer to each other. I know, I've been talking to people I haven't contacted in months, if not years.
Great. Before I move on to the next question, just wanted to check with Darrel, Ross, and Rowena if you wanted to weigh in on this.
I think that everything that Suzy and Charmaine and JJ have raised is absolutely relevant. I think that we're not going to move away from the continuation of this kind of high density cycle. But I think the thing that we'll be addressing are things that everyone has talked about, how we actually manage life on an ongoing basis in the context of everything that's just happened. So it'll be that we do start to do simple things like integrate things like air purification, etc. But I think we'll also bring into play practices that we've learned from this on an ongoing basis. And I look at Hong Kong's response to the current crisis. The reason the numbers here are so much smaller is that everyone is consciously prepared for this as well. Mm-hmm. We've been through this once before, so immediately that something happened in China, people automatically started wearing masks and things. I don't know, Suzy just got back from Australia. She probably saw 3 people wearing masks in the whole time she's there. So
they were all Chinese.
Yeah, exactly. So on the back of this, we'll be adopting and adapting the processes that have been put in place and rethinking how we live in density. But density as a trend will continue for all the reasons that Charmaine mentioned, really, because it is the most environmental footprint and the easiest footprint to deal with populations of the sizes that we have now, and that, based on future projections, we're going to have to deal with. So,
Rowena, one last thought on that before?
Yeah, sure. I grew up in Montreal in the suburbs, and I had a big front yard, a big backyard. People had their own swimming pools. I had a huge garden in the backyard. Now I live in a development in Hong Kong where, it's skyscrapers, but it's done in a development where there is a lot of open space, a lot of public space. There's, I actually, like, a lot of people ask me, after all these things happening in Hong Kong, why don't you move back to Canada? I'm happier living where I live. I used to live in Soho. Yes, with kids living in that kind of very densely populated place, it's not the best. But when done well, I actually have a better quality of life now, because no, I don't want to mow my lawn every day or every week. I don't want to clean my own pool. There's a lot of great examples in Hong Kong that the West can learn from. The things that we need to still catch up on are things like ventilation. In Hong Kong, we don't have fresh air ventilations. when we look at split type air conditioners, it just recirculates the same air. And unless you open your window, which brings in dust and brings in noise, you're never getting fresh air. So things like that is where we really have to improve on. But I think, as I said, when done well with good developers and a vision, your quality of life can, in my case, I would even say improve, being in a densely populated area.
Thank you. So we've got a lot of, if not most of our listeners are probably working in the industry, and I wanted to shed the light now on the actual business of design. And spring is typically a very good time for us in the global design industry because many fairs, exhibitions are taking place. With many, if not most of these now canceled, it's upended the marketing sales cycles for many brands, and companies that previously had been slow to adopt to digital transformation are now finding themselves on a burning platform. At the same time, consumers will be emerging from this crisis with a different mindset, which designers and retail brands will have to take into account. So I wanted to pose this question to all of you, but primarily I want to start with Ross, Darrel, and Suzy on how is this changing the business of design, and because we still have a few more topics to get through, if we can just get straight to the point, what do designers and brands need to be doing today to continue to survive, and what should they be thinking about in 3 to 6 months time when we emerge from this? So Suzy, apart from making sure that we continue to support Design Anthology.
Yeah, look, I don't know if I have an answer to that question, to be honest. I think, like I said earlier, we had done a lot of groundwork internally within our team to make sure that our company could run from a distance without knowing that the protests were coming and that the virus was coming. So when all of that did happen, it was a very easy transition for us. And I've actually been really quite shocked, to be honest, at the conversations that I'm hearing across different industries about how ill-prepared companies were for this. So it's really encouraging to hear JJ and him saying he's just sort of transitioned back also into a workplace or a work agreement or work sort of situation that he had already done before. And I think maybe not just for designers specifically, but for anyone in the industry, it's really about making sure you can work with your team, I suppose, and communicate in a way that's easy and seamless. And whatever programs or apps work best for you, I think you have to get on it and you have to do it now. And it's, I think for us also, the team that we have in place, I trust, and there is this constant communication and, I'm not sort of constantly worrying about whether stuff's getting done. And we actually had a team meeting this morning over Google Hangouts, not Zoom. But, I actually said to them, this of all the things that we all have to worry about right now and to be kind of freaking out about, this part of my life, running the business, is actually one thing that I don't have to worry about. So I would just say, whatever it takes for you to be able to work remotely and for your team to be able to do that in a smooth way, for your clients to feel confident that things are still going to happen and that you're going to be still in communication, you've got to do it. You've got to do it now.
And then this really underscores the importance of digital. And Darrel, we talked about this as well. Ross, I know that you consult with a lot of retail brands in terms of their retail strategy. What are your thoughts on this?
I think the key thing from all the conversations we've had so far is, from a designer perspective, and I don't know what, JJ, you think about this, but from a design perspective, a lot of people we know are actually taking a breath. So they're taking a breath because the design cycle almost became, and this is maybe a slight exaggeration, almost became as frenetic as the fashion cycle. Definitely. And people felt this compulsion to be producing new collections, whether it was really, truly relevant to the moment or not, to be continually producing collections for April launches, for September launches. A lot of great designer friends that we know are like, we're taking a pause and actually think about what we really want to bring to market, as opposed to the commerce behind continually bringing stuff to market is number one. Number two is the thing that you raised, is a lot of companies just in I think from a fashion model perspective, a lot of key brands were riding the wave of digital. The kind of industrial product design companies really were coasting on old school business models of trade shows, etc. And now what's happened is that they've had to play catch up. So there's been all this kind of crazy innovation. People are squirreling away behind scenes right now, trying to figure out how they can bring product live to a platform using a digital medium. But conversely, this crazy old school thing has happened where they're also looking at nurturing personal commercial relationships. Mm-hmm. So they're looking at really basic things like, rather than scattergun sending out things like EDMs of new product launches, etc., to everybody, they're actually tailor-making what they think is an appropriate group of items to present to key clients. So there's two things: trying to play catch up and trying to really jump on the wave of digital innovation, but also going back to this really lovely old school personal relationship. Yes, you know, let's talk together and figure out what's right for your demographic, for your market. And then lastly, I think the really interesting thing is like the bigger retail powerhouses are having a conversation with their supply chain, with their designers about, okay, we've got to get through this next cycle. We've obviously got stock. How do we take that to market? But then what's our long-term strategy for manufacturing, production, and design, so that if this happens again, we're actually in a position to not be holding a huge amount of stock and not to be manufacturing heavy, those kinds of things. So it's this combination of, okay, how do we want to respond in the future to general commerce, and how do we want to respond to commerce in the crisis room?
And just to touch on what Darrel said, I work with the great designer in Beirut, Nada Debs, and she wrote to me yesterday, and she's been in quarantine for 2 weeks, and she actually said it was slightly a gift, because she got off of the conveyor belt, and she had time to really not have to rush her new designs, her new collection. She had time to reach out to people she hadn't reached out to in a long time, as we were saying earlier on. And I think it really is, it's a time to push new innovation. And I'm really excited in some respects to see what collaborations come out of this, what new interesting designs come out of it. And I think it's a huge opportunity for designers to create products to support the world globally, in adjusting to what everyone has been through and what we really need, like meaningful product that's useful.
You know, I've been talking to a lot of designers and architects, and they've been saying that one bad thing that's come out of this is the supply chains that have been disrupted. You know, a lot of Hong Kong designers and architects get their products from China, and factories have been closed until recently. So projects have been delayed and deliveries have been slow. And one architect I spoke to who does quite high-end residential projects said that, you know, in normal circumstances, he buys almost 80% of his clients' furniture from Italy. But we know what's happened to Italy, and Italy and China, you know, they've been the hardest hit, and they also are relied on for so much of our construction and furniture trades. So it's an opportunity perhaps for other companies to step in or step up. One thing, I read an article recently, and I think that the takeaway quote from that was that an architect said that it wasn't until this crisis hit that we realized how little is made locally. So I think, you know, we might be seeing more local manufacturing after this.
I hope so.
Actually, so it's kind of part of the journey that we've been going through with Liquid Interiors, is that, you know, if you look at property prices in Hong Kong right now, when you buy a new property, the prices of new properties have gone down about 25%, but then an existing property, like an old property, it's still going up. And that has drastically changed the type of people that have been coming through our door and asking us for inquiries. Before, it was full renovations, redo the kitchen, redo the bathrooms, and now most of them are like, I just want furniture. I just want the built-in furniture. I'm keeping the kitchen and I'm keeping the bathroom. And maybe it's because, you know, it's a new building, and, you know, we have to follow the trends, we have to follow the demand. So exactly what you're saying is we're currently we are developing a furniture line that can speak to the needs of space saving in Hong Kong, and then tying that into wellness and sustainability. But yeah, like these things they do happen organically out of need. So I'm excited to let you know that we will be letting you know more about that later. And then, yeah, it is important to be able to connect everything online, because now all the furniture that we buy is online, and our clients are completely fine with looking at a picture of things online and purchasing it. They don't need to touch and feel. So the whole way that we buy furniture now is different from even 3 years ago.
Right.
Yeah, it's a great time right now.
Thank you.
To look at online services.
I want to spend the last 10 minutes talking about something that many of you have already raised, and this fact that this is not about a pause and then things are going to go back to normal. In fact, this has forced every organization to think about what do we want to be when we come out of this, correct? And that this should be viewed, our emergence from this crisis should be viewed as a great restart, not as a great reset. And so we've seen the creative community and practitioners mobilized around so many causes, from making face masks, providing virtual studio tours, providing their expertise online and what have you. So this kind of proverbial wiping of the slate clean is ushering an intense period of innovation and creativity, we hope. Lee Edelcourt, this erstwhile trend forecaster, has called this time is a much needed quarantine of consumption, and that will usher in a better system for the environment and the people. So this last 10 minutes that we have, and this is I understand, a very broad topic. What are your thoughts on creativity, sustainability, and the way forward, the future of this industry? Who would like to take that first? Okay. Oh. Okay.
Well, yeah, I could just speak from personal experience. Personally, for me, our studio has been working from home officially since first week of Feb, and it's already April. And during that time, I've gotten a carpenter in, a handyman in to fix things around the house. I've thrown away 80% of my stuff.
I see a lot behind you, though.
There's still a lot, so I haven't done the book thing yet, but like the clothing and then the some other items and things. And I think that if you how can we turn to people are saying working from home is the prison. It could be a home if you just, like what Ross and Darrel were saying, if you just turn it into a home, and instead of a storage unit or a wardrobe, just turn it into a home and just keep the things that really matter to you. And I think my clients are going to feel the same way. They're just going to look around and say, what are the things that really matter to us? We're just going to keep that. And if we get more things in the future, what are the things that are really going to matter? What are the design objects? What are the case goods? What are the wardrobes? What are the chairs and tables that are going to last forever, that we're going to treasure and going to make us feel comfortable and at home? And I think Suzy's coming out with a line in the Design Anthology shop with things that are locally made. And speaking of locally made, I just wanted to say really quickly that, we live in an interconnected world, and that's great and all of that. But when there's a pandemic that comes around, suddenly all the borders are closed. So in terms of a supply chain, what Charmaine was talking about, we're affected too. We have a restaurant that was supposed to open this week. Now it can't open until May because we have stuff in Portugal and in the UK that can't come here. Then it's going to make me really think as a designer, what are the lighting and the goods and the furniture that are closer to Hong Kong that we can outfit and style our place with? Those guys in UK and Italy, maybe those factories should open a mini factory closer to the markets that they want to cater to, just in case some borders close up. These are the longer term ramification that's going to affect all of us. Better quality stuff, better quality products, only consume the things that are of value, and maybe create a trade industry closer to home that we can support. Who knows?
Great, thank you.
Can I just weigh in on that? You know, all that sounds great, but I have a problem because, you know, when we talk about ethical consumption, you know, it's often a double-edged sword because, you know, we have to be careful not to stigmatize the poor because there aren't that many eco-friendly, budget, great products out there. There just isn't that choice of those sorts of products. And, you know, I guess the choice is not to buy as much, you know. I think it's good that sustainability is being banded around more often now. Last year at the Milan Furniture Fair, it was a main theme, sustainability, and we saw a lot of companies producing products from materials that otherwise would have ended up in landfill. So that's really good. And we're seeing some companies also take up the circular model so that they're not actually selling their furniture, they are leasing, and people have the opportunity to return their goods when, you know, they've come to the end of their lives, and you know that you're doing something good because the company will dispose of it properly and salvage bits that can be reused. So, you know, yeah, we are doing something, but of course, there's always more that we can do.
Rowena, do you want to, oh, sorry, Darrel, yes? Ross, go ahead.
I think what Charmaine was just talking about is, you know, since the Industrial Revolution, we've really been working or functioning on the mechanism of a linear economy. And so the premise of that is really just this take, make, use, and discard kind of mentality. What's been happening probably over the last, I don't know, 5 years, from a design community, there's been really been a dialogue and a transition around the idea of this circular economy. And hopefully this instance will at least help us reset from this kind of planned obsolescence model of consumption that we've had, reset the needle. And even if it resets the needle 10 to 20%, like even if we've entered the kind of the design conscious thought around producing things from a more circular economy perspective, 10 to 20%, that's going to have a massive impact. We'll never change, or as a democratic capitalist society within the developed countries, we'll never, not in the foreseeable future, will we change the linear economy model. But as long as we're making an attempt to transition towards something that is a lot more ecological and environmental, we're slowly winning a battle. It's not going to be an overnight battle, but this instant should at least give us pause to think about these things and how we can integrate more sustainable design into what we're doing.
And I'd like to just mention the Lee interview that I also read. I agree in some respects, and you know, I would hope that through this crisis, communities will form a greater understanding of the appreciation of the simple things, because I think this has really given everybody the time to sit in silence and reflect on, you know, how we're doing things and how we should be doing things or could be doing things. And the simple things, you know, the environment, nature, climate change, our friends, family, all of these things are so important. And I think they've really come to light in the last few weeks. And for me, I think, you know, as a race, we foolishly felt that we're completely in control of things, when in fact this has proven that we're not. Within an instant, it can change. And I also recently was reading something from the statement from Viktor Frankl, who was a Holocaust survivor. And I love the fact he said, when we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves. And I think that that is really relevant right now, because I think whether it's design, whether it's in the finance business or whatever, I think it is time to consider, you know, how we can do things better.
Yeah, can I just say a few words also? I think it sort of touches a little bit on some things that Charmaine and Ross and Darrel and JJ have said. That I think one thing that I would hope that would come from this is that perhaps we can maybe all slow down a little bit. I know that's probably a big ask, particularly for Hong Kong. You know, going back to what Ross said about Milan and designers feeling like they were on a bit of a conveyor belt, I was feeling the same myself last year in Milan, and as media and kind of watching this circus, which is so much fun to be part of, but it is a lot. And it is just this sort of system of churning out product. And I think it would be really nice. I think we've all had this slower pace forced upon us, sometimes begrudgingly. I'm getting used to it though. It would be nice to slow down a little bit and actually just use this time to reflect on perhaps things that are really important to us, because, you know, we've all sort of talked about it, but obviously once this is over, the whole climate crisis thing hasn't gone away. It's still there. It still needs action and a response. And I think just using this time to reflect about what's important to us, and whether it is purely about consumption, or just, you know, what we decide to put out there in the world and the way that we communicate with people, I think is really important.
Rowena, would you like to?
So I got a comment, a WhatsApp message from a client, you know, a few weeks ago, and she said, oh, you know, we're quarantined at home, but we're so happy to be quarantined in such a beautiful home. And they were enjoying it because they were enjoying their home and they loved it. It was a recent project that we completed. And, you know, if you design well, and we actually design a lot around the zero waste philosophy. I know our clients have been messaging me laughing about, you know, oh, no toilet paper, but, you know, we all have smart toilets or hand showers, and, you know, it's like, what do you need toilet paper for? You know, or we've designed so many roof gardens that are, you know, they're just flourishing with passion fruits and all kinds of herbs growing outside. And, you know, when you design that into your philosophy and then you bring those things in, you'll see that, you know, you actually don't need to go out and buy so many things. And I think it's important for people to embrace that, and in all design. You know, when you design for zero waste, you'll realize, oh, you won't need to, it's not as much of a need to go out and get new things all the time.
Great.
And I also think that, like, right now, it is important for us to kind of sit back and rethink of our own brands. Maybe it's a time for, you know, like, this is a time that we're actually redoing our own website, taking time to really connect with the things that we want for our business in the future. And, you know, like, when I first started Liquid Interiors, it was after the financial crisis. So I know what you know, it was slow, and then, you know, it gave us time to really develop things, more of our philosophy. And, you know, I think it's like this cycle of economy gives us a breather. It's a rebalancing.
Absolutely. Charmaine, final thoughts from you. Charmaine.
Final thoughts. Well, I've been thinking about decluttering and, you know, Marie Kondoing and all that sort of stuff. And I hope that we might be able to move away from self-righteous minimalism to self-preservation minimalism.
Very wise words, and I can't top that. So, unfortunately, in the interest of time and holding ourselves to it, that I need to wrap up this talk, and I know that we can go on, and I will see you guys offline. I'd like to thank each of our panelists again for their time and insights today. In the next day or two, we will be posting the video on our website, together with some key takeaways from what they've shared today, as well as some industry resources. Please visit us at www.catchonco.com to be able to download the video. Our next design webinar will be held on May 6th, when we release our next edition of the 10+10 Made in China report, identifying the 10 trends and the 10 trailblazers shaping China's design landscape. Please tune in for that. Thank you once again. Have a great day. Slow down, reflect, reset. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks.